when I first started listening to your podcast, that was the only podcast I ever listened to. I never thought to search through and listen to anything else.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Jackie Fletcher. Jackie and Joe have known each other for a good few years through social media. As you'll hear, Jackie has been a listener to the podcast from pretty much the beginning, and she is a member of Joe's Platinum Calm Mastermind, so they know each other well. Jackie sold a family business in 2017, and never having had a job, she had only had her own businesses and worked in the family business. She felt like many business owners, unemployable. She has been helping her sister with some networking and marketing for her business, Purple Hat Property, and in January 2019 took on a new role as chapter chair for London in the Women Presidents Organisation. Women Presidents Organisation, WPO, is a not-for-profit organisation supporting women business founders, CEOs, and managing directors of medium to large-sized businesses through peer-to-peer learning. Jackie has always considered herself overweight and at times out of control with her eating. In May 2017, she read Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes, and since then has been following a low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic way of eating. Jackie is passionate about the ketogenic way of eating as a way to reduce weight, reduce the effects of chronic diseases, and feel amazing. In 2019, she decided to make low-carb and keto part of her vision to help others on their journey to health and weight loss. Jackie started her own podcast in 2020 with Louise Reynolds and is helping those starting out on their keto diet through coaching and keto courses. Fabulously Keto is aimed at helping the over 40s take back control of their way of eating, health and weight. Jackie lives in Epping, Essex with her husband and twin sons Ben and Alex. In her spare time, she enjoys watching films and select programs with her boys, practicing taekwondo, playing bridge and spending time with her friends. Oh, and more keto talk with anyone who is interested. Jackie has a certificate in the ketogenic diet, is a nutrition advisor and is a trainee functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She is also an ambassador for the charity phcuk.org, Public Health Collaboration, dedicated to informing and implementing healthy decisions for better public health. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Jackie Fletcher of Fabulously Keto. Welcome, Jackie. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
It's really sort of odd to be interviewing you as well, because we've known each other quite a long time through sort of business, but we've worked together quite a lot in the last year. So unusually, I know you quite well. So maybe we'll just skip to the end. I don't need to ask you any questions.
That won't really help the listeners, though.
No, that's true. Good point. Okay, let's do it properly then. So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
So, as you know, I'm Jackie Fletcher. And I'm just going to go back in time a little bit and say 4 years ago, I was extremely overweight. And at 5'3", I weighed in at 16.5 stone. And I knew for my health that I needed to make a change, but I just couldn't do it. So I knew wheat was addictive, but I just couldn't stop eating it. And I didn't believe in diets because diets don't work. But I did buy into the belief that eat less and move more. So I felt what I needed to do was eat less and move more. And every night I'd go to bed and I'd say to myself, tomorrow I'm going to be good. Tomorrow I'm going to eat less, and tomorrow I'm going to move more, and I'm going to do some exercise. And every morning I'd wake up and nothing will have changed. I couldn't eat less and I couldn't move more. Mm-hmm. And that had a real knock-on effect in the way that I didn't believe in myself. I thought I had no willpower. I didn't feel good about myself. And then I listened to one of your podcasts, actually. So I've got you to thank for this. And in the podcast, somebody recommended a book, Gretchen Rubin.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I bought that book that same week. It was on Audible, and I listened to the book. And in that book, she recommended another book, which was called Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. Now, I'm in this place where I know that nothing works. It's a load of rubbish. Why would I change anything that I do? Because I've got no willpower and I can't do it. But I bought the book, another one on Audible, and that book changed my life. So now what am I doing is I'm helping people change their lives, basically. So I'm helping them to lose weight, reduce their type 2 diabetes symptoms by bringing their blood sugars under control. Anything to do with metabolic disease, basically. I'm helping people make that change. So that's the long version of what I'm doing. And where am I? I'm in Essex in the UK, just outside Epping.
Lovely. So what did you think? So was it the Better Than Before book that you read?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I've just been Googling on my website, hence the slight gap there when you said where you were from and then stopped. I thought, oh, hang on. I reckon that was show number 2. I reckon that was Paula Gardner. Paula Gardner's been on the show twice, and she's recommended a lot of our guests. She's a lovely friend of mine, and how funny that is. Show number 2 made that impact, because you're going to be on show number 209.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago, but I think, well, maybe I'd gone back to listen to some older ones.
Yeah, because I thought it was Jenny Flintoff, because she mentioned the Happier podcast, but it was the podcast rather than the book. That was Gretchen Rubin as well. So, and then the only other one that's mentioned her is Kathy, who was the first show. So unless my show notes are rubbish. But as you say, maybe you did go back. But anyway, it's lovely. And sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, I definitely know I've listened to Kathy, and I did start at the beginning. That was a long time ago. I mean, when was your?
It was. I should check this out, because I keep talking about when we started and I can never quite remember. But Ellie, I think, was only 8 and she's 14 now. I thought it was 2016. But as you say, that was a bit longer ago than you were saying. You said 4 years, didn't you? So maybe it was. It was
2017 when I listened to the podcast.
Yeah. So.
But I'd definitely heard some of your older ones.
Yeah. Well, maybe you sort of started where it was, and then you went back to catch up on the ones that you hadn't listened to before. So but either way, I've always been happy since you told me that to hear that even from the early days, we, as it now turns out, we've been inspiring people to do things differently. And not only did that help you to lose weight, you started a business from it, didn't you? So as you said, so it's really inspiring for me. So let's just go back before that, though. So this is quite different to you, because not everybody goes and does something, whatever it may be, and then turns it into a business. But I think you've had quite a sort of varied career in the past. So maybe it's not so much of a surprise, because you've done lots of different things. But tell us a bit more about, what you've done in the past and why this then became the thing that you wanted to do, other than obviously the fact that it was inspiring and had helped you and everything else.
Yeah. So, I've always done lots of things. I left school in the middle of my A-levels because I'd had a tumour on my ovaries when I was not quite 18. So when I went into the upper 6th, when we started the Upper Six, I was in hospital and then had to be off school for quite a while. And so when I went back to school, I ended up going back into a lower year. So I wasn't with all my friends, and an opportunity came for me to go to Tenerife and work in a hotel, unpaid, but that's what I decided I'd wanted to do, which was hotel and catering. You know, when you've got to make a choice about what you want to do for school and when you leave school, and I had absolutely no idea at whatever age I was. And my dad said, well, why don't you do hotel and catering? People will always want to go on holiday and they'll always want to go out to eat. She says, in the middle of COVID, where people still want to go on holiday and want to go out to eat, but they can't.
Oh.
And but what I didn't think about is you're working when everybody else, all your friends, are out having fun.
Yes.
So anyway, I went off and I worked in this hotel and I had a great time. I was in Tenerife for on and off for 18 months. And I went to college and did hotel and catering. And then we ended up buying a business in Mallorca, which was property management. So mostly British people who had properties in Puerto Pollensa in Mallorca, and they wanted to rent it out, or they did rent it out, or they let friends use it. So we would go in and do the cleaning and making sure that the properties were all looked after properly. So I did that for about 10 years. And during that time, I also did some karaoke. We had a bar. We ran a bar for 6 weeks. But after living there for 10 years, I decided I loved it there. The summers were really busy, full on non-stop. The winters were really quiet and quite cold. But some of my family were dying, and I just thought, actually, I think it's now time for me to go home. So I came back home. We had a family business, which was minicabs in central London. And so I went into the business there. And then later on, I decided that wasn't where I wanted to spend all my time. It's quite a negative industry. And so I went back to learning and learned to be a hypnotherapist. And the main thing I focused on once I qualified was hypnobirthing. So I was helping pregnant women have calm and easy births. And then, but during that time, my dad died, and we had a general manager in the business, but I felt that I needed to get more involved. So I did. And so I did that from 2012 till we sold it in 2017. Again, amidst COVID, I'm quite glad we sold it when we did, because although it was, it's 27 years of having a business, and it was quite sad to let it go, I'm just very glad that we don't have it now.
Yeah.
So then in that time between 2017, starting on this way of eating just came at an opportune time when I had time to do something. So I could focus on something else because I wasn't doing anything in particular at that time.
Yes, yeah.
So I just thought, well, why don't I try and do something that I'm going to love doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is inspiring for other people. I mean, I've known you for quite a while, and I've sort of followed along in the last year, particularly with this, well, longer than that, probably 18 months, 2 years, with this journey. And it's interesting because I've, known of keto in different sort of places for quite a while. And whilst I'm not one of your customers or follow along in that sort of way, I'm in your Facebook group and stuff, but you have kept me on the straight and narrow, and I know it's not very straight or very narrow because I'm a bit more flexible than you.
Yeah.
But during the last 6 months of lockdown, after getting a bit out of hand in the summer, because I thought, enjoy yourself rather than worrying about everything else, you have inspired me to be much more organised, controlled and aware of how I eat, just by being who you are, which has got to be a really good basis for starting a business helping people, hasn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Well, I'm glad that I've inspired you.
So your background is so varied, but it strikes me it was so sort of out there and often quite sort of reactive in terms of, a customer comes in, you have to deal with them, a call comes in, you need a cab sort of thing. And I know you did, the management side, I'm sure accounts and all that sort of stuff would have come into it and things like that. But how do you keep yourself motivated now to get the things done that you need to get done? Because we're in the businesses now where sort of, apart from when customers ask for things, we could just not do anything. So, one of the challenges, I think, for home-based coaches and consultants sometimes is about making sure that we do keep going even when people can't see what we're doing. How do you do that?
I think I just have in my head, I'm going to work. So Monday to Friday is a work day, and I get up and maybe I arrive at my desk later than I would if I was, not that I've ever had a job, but if I was in a job, you'd be expected to be at your desk by 9 o'clock. I just maybe arrive at 9:15 or 9 or 8:45 or 10 o'clock, whatever is going on in the morning, I will arrive at my desk. But when I do, I just sort of sit down and get on with what I need to get on. Yeah. Now, at the moment, the podcast is taking up a lot of time. And so getting every episode ready is, that's my main focus. So what needs to be done today, what has to be done today, and what can be left till tomorrow. I probably look through all my tasks and just see what's the most important. So I'm not terribly good at planning in advance. So I know lots of people plan it all out and they sit down the night before, and I don't tend to do that.
No.
But around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock is when I'll pack up and I'll go and see my mum. She lives next door to us, so we're always in each other's houses. Well, we go to her house more than she comes to ours, but that's my afternoon routine really, is to go and sit with her for a bit.
Yeah. So how do you work with your clients? What does a day look like for you? You've obviously mentioned the podcast, which you launched 4 months ago? Yep. Well, actually, when this goes out, it'll have been over 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's true.
So that, as you say, has consumed a lot of your time. It's an excellent podcast. If you're interested in keto, I'd definitely suggest checking out Fabulously Keto on any of the usual platforms. But when you're actually then working with clients, what does that look like in the day? How are you working in groups, individually? How does it go?
Mostly I'm working one-to-one. I have run a couple of groups, but at the moment, and I think for 2021, I'm going to be focusing on one-to-one clients. And that is there's a piece around educating them, because it's the challenge with keto is the old paradigm of eat less, move more has to go. Fat is bad for you has to go. These were hypotheses that came into being and have been battered into our brains over decades now. And they're not right. They weren't based on science. They were based on associational data that has shown to be untrue and is causing more damage to the population than, it's almost criminal, really, that people could get away with saying what they wanted to say and everybody's followed. And now we're seeing it in terms of type 2 diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, all these heart disease, all these diseases that actually have come about because we made that change in our food and our lifestyle.
Yeah, I think there's that sort of famous comparable graph thing, which I think I probably saw in Zoe, what's her surname? Harcom's book a long time ago. I read that long before I even knew what keto was, sort of thing, of that when they said that fat was bad for you in America and England, you can then look at the sort of trajectory of obesity, and you can see the reason you can see that it correlates is because the graph goes up at different times of the century based on what happened in each of the countries at those times, isn't it? So it's that, I remember seeing that. I think it must have been her book, and just thinking, oh my God, now I've seen that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I can see why the one-to-one thing is really key as well, because of what you said, because it's almost like you can read a book, you can follow a course, you can listen to a podcast that tells you how you should eat from a sort of keto perspective, but the difference between knowing and doing is just like it was when you were being told to exercise more and eat less. Knowing and doing are two unconnected things in lots of ways, in lots of people and lots of situations, aren't they?
Yeah. And what I like to do is tailor it to that person, because not everybody wants to go full on keto. Not everybody wants to do it straight away. Sometimes we will set smaller goals so that over time those carbs come down. And so I like to work with the client with what the client is comfortable with.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm getting them to decide what they want to achieve for the next month or the next week, and that's what we work towards. And then there's some accountability, is how have you done it? So maybe they'll be sending me their the food that they've eaten. Sometimes it's in picture form, sometimes it's written down. It just depends. Not everybody wants to track all their food. Some people love tracking food. So it just depends. Sometimes I say, just send me photos take a picture, send it to me.
Yeah.
And that keeps them accountable and keeps them on track.
That reminds me of Graham Alcott on the podcast probably a year or 18 months ago. He had somebody helping him with his eating, and it wasn't about keto, it was a different concept, but that's exactly how she coached him. He had to send her photos of everything he ate, and he said just that affected what he chose to put in his mouth, because he knew he had to send it to her.
Yeah. I remember that podcast, actually. I listened to that one.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. So how do you make sure you get done what you need to get done? You talked about not being a sort of a big planner. I'd normally next ask you, how do you sort of shut off your day? But you've said already you've got your your routine ritual of going to see your mum. So that's the end of your day. Do you, before that, see what you've done, see what you need to do next? How does that getting things done thing work for you?
Yeah. So another Joe Dodds Power to Live More podcast tip is I downloaded Todoist, and I used it for a while, and then I stopped using it, but I've actually brought it back in now. So everything that I have to do goes into Todoist. And so before the end of the day, now this could be before the end of the work day, I might look through it, but it could be before I go to bed, is I look through and make sure that I haven't missed anything that I absolutely need to do. And anything that can wait till tomorrow will wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I do find that I have tasks that can wait till tomorrow, and that tomorrow never comes, and they just keep getting deferred and deferred. But at least I know that the ones that absolutely have to be done are done.
Yes. Yeah. This is like the Mutual Appreciation Society today, isn't it? Yes. As you know, I am a big fan of Todoist, and exactly that. I have some things that just sit there forever and ever. In fact, the latest one made me laugh. Ellie has to record the intros for this podcast, as you know, and it's almost like she's at home school, obviously, rather than being at school, and it's giving us even less time somehow to do them. Maybe it's because we've got more time, we're just not doing it so much. So I have it on the to-do list like every day, and it frustrates me because it's not my task. I can't do it.
Yes.
And it comes up every week. So last night I actually ticked it as having been done, even though from last Thursday it hasn't been, because I don't want it messing up my to-do list.
Yeah, you're very good. You organise yours much better than I do.
But I thought, well, it's going to come around again on Thursday. I'll make her do it tomorrow, and then that'll be fine. And I don't need this one hanging around making me feel bad when it's not even my task.
Yeah, I have tasks like that when I have my boys do things like the one currently on my Todoist at the moment is for them to change their sheets, which came up on Sunday, and they still haven't done it, but it reminds me to nag them.
Yes. Yeah, and mine gets thrown into arguments with Simon where I end up going, I don't want this on my to-do list. It's your job. You have a list. Write it on your list. But he doesn't really do to-do lists. So I keep it on my list and just get annoyed instead.
Yeah, nag. The things that we don't want to do is nag, and we do.
Yeah, exactly. So what about other tools and apps? What do you live by? What could you not live without?
The one that I really, really don't think I could live without now is I have an iPad with an Apple Pencil, and it's called Notability because I can write. It's like having a notebook, but it's all electronic.
Yes.
And I can search for things. So I hardly ever write on paper now. And that is my absolutely love, Notability.
So does it turn it into type or does it keep it handwritten?
That is its only downside. You can turn it into type, but when you export it, it comes out like a picture. So you can't really edit it and do anything with it.
No.
I should check and make sure that they haven't updated it because they are constantly updating it. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy. I don't mind that. I've got my notes and I can go back to it and find things.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny. There's so many like things like that and gadgets or stuff, and I see them. I think, oh, that sounds so cool. I've had a rocket book on my Amazon wish list for ages, which just as a slight aside. My mum used to say this, and my mother-in-law said it at Christmas. She said, your wish list needs updating. And I said, oh, yeah, I haven't looked at it for ages. I said, there's probably a few things on there. She went, yeah, but not anything that I'd buy you. And my mum used to do the same. She'd say, oh, no, I'm not buying anything that's on there. And I'm like, well, surely the point is it's a wish list because I want whatever's on there. So if you bought it, I'd be happy. The fact that you don't like it.
Yeah. So what is a rocket?
So a rocket book is it's a notebook, like an offline notebook that you write in, but then you it transfers. I can't remember if you take a picture of it or whether it automatically transfers it to a digital file, and then you clear the book and you can keep using the book. So basically it's a reusable notebook.
Right. Okay.
And I always thought that sounded good, and I keep thinking about getting an Apple Pencil for my iPad Pro, but I don't ever write anything. So,
then you probably wouldn't use it, but I do prefer to write than type.
Yeah, I'm a typer. And also I'm not a visual person, as in I've said it before on the podcast that some people can't explain anything without grabbing a bit of paper and drawing something for you. I found a note in my file yesterday. I was doing a bit of sorting, and one of my friends, Anna Mika, was helping me plan out a thing that I was going to do that I never got around to doing, or decided not to do, should I say. And as she was planning it, she was drawing out columns and writing things in and arrows and everything else. And it just reminded me that some people speak by writing or speak and write at the same time. I've never been like that. Another reason why I don't like mind maps. I'm not interested in, pictures and shapes and everything. I like lists.
Yeah.
So for me, the idea of writing on my iPad or drawing pictures on my iPad sounds brilliant, apart from I don't ever do that on paper. So why would I do it on my iPad?
Yeah. Well, for me, I do write quite linearly.
Yes.
But I just
in handwriting.
prefer to have it. Yeah, I prefer to have it on my iPad. So I've got it with me, and I can look into it on my phone, and it's always there.
Yeah,
it's always with me, even if I haven't got my iPad with me.
Yeah, and I mean that's the same principle as how I use Evernote. I've always made notes into Evernote on my phone if I'm in a meeting or if I need to do some brainstorming. It always goes into Evernote, so it's there, findable, searchable, and all that sort of thing. Rather than I don't know, 10 years ago where I'd end up writing in notebooks and then end up notebooks in the cupboard that I could never find anything in.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Anything else before?
So yes. So one thing I'm going to mention here is that I'm trying to move people over from WhatsApp to Signal, because apparently it's not owned by Facebook and has better security. So that's one app. The other one that I've been using recently, the last few weeks I haven't been as good, but is called Down Dog, and they have yoga, HIIT and meditation and pregnancy yoga, I think. Not that I'm going to need. I was going to
say, all those things are quite unrelated, aren't they? Well, yoga and meditation you could see together, but they're HIIT in the middle of it, and now you've mentioned pregnancy as well.
Yeah, But anyway, I've been using the yoga app. As I said, I haven't been very good the last couple of weeks, but every other day I was doing a yoga session.
Yeah.
The other one I use a bit. I'm not very good at food tracking, but if I want to track my food, I will use Chronometer, and that's Chronometer. Then Todoist, of course.
Yes.
And then another one that I need to use more, but I do use some of it, and this another one from you is Text Expander.
Yes.
So I've been trying to use that more, but I tend to only use snippets, like when I'm going to write my name or my email address or my website address. So I need to find a way to learn how to use that more.
Yeah, it's interesting. Text Expander for me, and the use of, is a bit like my thing about outsourcing, in that it's brilliant when you've done it, but you procrastinate in doing it in the first place. So I currently am not booking people into interview on the podcast. I will be by the time this goes out, but at the moment in January I'm not, because I've got podcasts recorded up till June at the moment, or nearly June. So I'm taking a bit of a break from booking people in, and every time I write that email that says, yeah, they sound great, but please contact me in a couple of months' time, I think, I must put this into Text Expander as a standard reply, and then I can just type one word or two and it will be there. And I've thought that every time I've written that, probably for the last 10 occasions.
Okay,
I still haven't done it.
That's given me an idea, because every week I send an email to whoever's podcast is going live this week and saying, your podcast is going live this week. Here are the photos. Here's what you can do. But I just tend to look up the last email, copy it, paste it, change it.
Yes.
So
really,
how do you remember? How do you remember what to?
Well, yeah, you just name it by whatever you think you are going to remember. So oddly, the one for me that I do when people have got a podcast coming out, or it's just come out, is called 7 Day Notice, because I optimistically decided I was going to give people 7 days notice that their podcast was coming out. And this was when I didn't do it religiously weekly. So I didn't really know when it was going to come out when I interviewed people. So I called it 7 Day Notice. The reality is I send it the day that their podcast is actually live. Yeah. It's not 7 days notice at all, but I remember it, so I'm not changing it now. So yeah, you just have to sort of pick that thing. And sometimes I've got things like my thank you email after I've interviewed you, which I do personalize, but I start with a standard one. I can never remember if it's podcast thank you or thank you podcast. So sometimes it takes a bit of a time to get the actual thing to turn up, and occasionally I have to go back to Text Expander and actually find the thing in there instead and just copy and paste it. But if you get really sophisticated, you can put variable fields in your Text Expander templates as well. So for example, the one that I do, which says thank you for your interview, it says your podcast will be coming out on, and then there's a gap, and so I get that up and it pops up and I fill in the date that it's due and then click OK, and then it puts it into the email for me. So you can do some quite sophisticated things with Text Expander to enable you to get real extra value from it, sort of thing. So so you're thinking I must get around to it. Now I've made it even more complicated.
No, but now it's but it wasn't that it was complicated. It was like
when would you use it, sort of thing.
Yeah. What do I use it for? So that's
so my email that goes out to a podcast guest, it pops up with the variables in it, and I tell them I have to put the link to the podcast in. I give them a quote from the podcast, so I have to copy and paste that from the show notes, and I give them a link to the folder that's got the Dropbox folder that's got all the images that I create for them in it, and that I just copy in from my project list in Asana as well. So I have those, like however many bits of information that was, to go in, and then it mail merges it all into the message, so that makes it quicker as well.
Yeah, I like that idea.
There we go. Lovely. So was that your list done? You had lots in there. That was very good.
Yes, I was trying to find ones that people hadn't mentioned over and over again, but
yes, yeah, there's some good ones in there, definitely. Let's talk a bit about self-care, because obviously we sort of started talking about the fact that you help people to go keto. See, I didn't mention diet there.
Yeah.
So what sort of things do you do yourself to make sure you've got enough energy to do the things that you need to do? So keto being one of them.
Yes, so I am keto mostly. I do keep my carbs fairly low, mostly very low. Fasting appears regularly in my way of living, so I'm giving my body a chance to have a break and detox.
Mm-hmm. And you fast for quite big chunks of time, don't you? I do sort of the eating window one, so I tend not to eat until the afternoon, but you actually go for like 24, 36 hours and that sort of thing. Is that? Yeah.
So I do the intermittent fasting. The time, I call it time restricted eating, where you're doing it on restricting to eating in a window every day. So I do that, which is usually 16:8, but sometimes 18:6, because I go from lunchtime, from supper time through to lunchtime. So I occasionally will eat something late morning, but rarely.
Yeah.
Then, for example, this week I ate on Sunday and it's now Wednesday. So I didn't eat from Sunday night through till this morning around 10:30. That was about 62 hours.
Wow.
I'll regularly do a 36-hour fast once or twice a week. And people that listen to this are going to be horrified, probably. How can you do that? But
they're probably also thinking your food bill must be low.
Yeah. And it doesn't take up any energy to make meals, clear up and all things like that.
No.
But actually, when you're fat adapted, it becomes very easy to just drop those meals, and you've probably experienced that anyway.
Yeah.
So other things include, I haven't been very good since Christmas, but before Christmas I was getting up every morning and doing some sort of exercise, whether it is the yoga, some kettlebells, a walk/run, some mostly walking with a little bit of running in between. I do taekwondo. We've been struggling with COVID, that everything's closed down, but we've now got some online classes. In fact, I have one tonight, so I'll be doing my taekwondo. I try to go to bed at a reasonable time so that I'm getting a good night's sleep. What else do I do? There's probably lots of other things that I can't even think of, that because you just do them automatically.
Yes, yeah.
But I watch what I eat. I try to do some exercise, if not every day, most days. Sleep. I make sure I get sleep. I take lots of supplements.
And I think, going back to what you said about the one-to-one sort of personalization, I think that's one of the keys with this, isn't it? I mean, I sort of generally follow a keto diet, and I generally make my family do so, because I just cook food and they have to eat it. And occasionally they ask me where the potatoes are or where the carbs are, and occasionally I might cook them pasta because I'm kind, or I haven't got much time, but it's easier. But I don't sort of do it so I don't know what the word would be, as you. I basically cook a load of keto recipes, so we're forever eating what would look like a normal, sometimes quite luscious menu, but actually most of it's keto because I'm substituting things and everything else sort of thing. So there's a whole range of how you can follow these sorts of guidelines, isn't there, to fit with your lifestyle?
Yeah, definitely.
This will make you traumatized. I made some, what are they called? What are they? Pecan caramel slices or something, and that's the first thing I ate yesterday afternoon. But they were keto. But
they're homemade, so therefore
homemade,
you know that there's no rubbishy oils in it that you shouldn't be eating. And
exactly. So they were sugar-free, weirdly. And but they were very lush. But so I take the sort of, how can I adapt everything I eat to be as keto as possible, but still be the sort of things that I normally would eat or want to eat, rather than sort of being any more restrictive, if you like. But that's the way I do it with my family, because then I can do it. Whereas because I'm the cook and you don't cook, do you, so much? You can, but your husband does a lot of it, doesn't he? So you can't control it in that way, can you? You have to control yourself rather than the whole thing. Whereas I have to cook, but I am generally the cook, so I have to adjust it accordingly, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, but that said, Julian does the cooking, but the boys, he doesn't eat what we eat. He has his own stuff, which is very carb heavy, sugar heavy, all the stuff that you shouldn't eat. And he is type 2 diabetic, so he definitely shouldn't be eating them, but that's what he wants to do. But the boys have sort of followed me in that they now don't have potatoes. They might have a pasta dish or something with potatoes on a night when I'm fasting or a night when I'm not here. So for the most part, Julian just does everything. It's fairly simple food, usually meat and the vegetables, but the boys are happy with that. So I'm happy that they're happy, and we're all good.
And it's so cool that he's cooking and has a different view and does his own thing, but he cooks it for you in the way that you want it. I think that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, he's very good like that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying about when you're not here. They were lamenting at the dinner table the other day that we haven't had a Chinese takeaway for a long time, and that's because I don't eat gluten. I never have done, aside from any keto thing. So not never have done for the last however many years. And it's for health reasons. I have a underactive thyroid, and it really made a massive difference to my management of that when I stopped eating gluten. So I don't even eat a speck of it, sort of thing. So the rule was that they could only have Chinese takeaways when I was away, because apart from really the duck without the pancakes and no sauce, I can't really eat most of anything that comes, because our local place doesn't do gluten-free. And so they were lamenting that because of lockdown, they've not had a Chinese takeaway since last February when I was last away.
Yeah, Chinese is really hard to stick to keto and have Chinese.
Yeah. Although on a gluten-free front, there are some excellent restaurants. Kathy Brown, the guest on show 1 and show 150, I think, her and I have a couple of times been to a gluten-free Chinese restaurant up in Manchester, which is just to die for, because you eat it so infrequently that you're so appreciative, sort of thing. But as you say, if we're ever going to do a takeaway, it's generally an Indian, because it's so much easier to control it, isn't it?
Definitely.
Apart from the rice and the potatoes.
But there's lots of things you can have on an Indian that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we eat curries all the time at home, but I tend to eat I don't know, I've been frying up courgette to have with it sort of recently. I bought a spiralizer last year thinking I'd use that instead of pasta and stuff, but I just chop them into squares now because it's so much quicker.
Yes.
But there you go, me and gadgets, eh?
Yes.
Lovely.
I do have a spiralizer, but I hardly ever use it because I'm quite happy with just whatever veg it is being underneath.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a certain shape, does it?
No.
Oh dear, I don't know. So just before we go into the last couple of questions, one of the other things that I ask about quite often is books and podcasts that you recommend, and I can't not ask you that on the basis that this podcast has been so useful to you. There must be others that you listen to, and also the books. You obviously bought a book as a result of this, and that's what kicked off this whole business.
Yeah. So when I first started listening to your podcast, that was the only podcast I ever listened to. I never thought to search through and listen to anything else.
You do that. No pressure. I'm glad I didn't know that at the time.
But since I've got into keto, I have found some podcasts about probably 2018. So what we're looking at, 3 years now. And so there's some I listen to regularly. So the ones I listen to week in, week out, Low Carb MD and the Keto Woman podcast. Others, there's loads of others that I dip into. Just depends how I'm off for time. And then I thought there's some business ones as well that I will dip into. So there's one called the Get Real About Business podcast with Clive Maloney, The Sigrun Show, and Online Marketing Made Easy by Amy Porterfield. So they're ones that I will dip into, as well as lots of other keto ones. Mm-hmm. Books, I can't go without saying Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It by Gary Taubes, because that just changed my life.
Along with my podcast.
Along with your podcast. And Gretchen Rubin's Better Than Before book.
Yes, of course.
But a couple of other, there's loads of keto books that I think, even if somebody's not interested in keto, just finding out about it you can't unknow what you know.
Yeah.
So I think just finding out a bit more about it would be fabulous for people.
Mm-hmm.
So The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz focuses in on why we have these food guidelines that we have and the seed oils that are so ubiquitous and how they came about and why they're in our culture where they really shouldn't be. So that's a great book. And then one that is fairly new is Why We Get Sick by Ben Bickman. So there's 3 big ones, but there's loads of others. And if people wanted to find out more, they could always get in touch with me.
Yes, yeah.
And then in terms, sorry, go on.
I was just say, of course, on your own podcast, you have a big disclaimer, which we probably should mention, that that this is all stuff to learn and educate yourself. We're not advising people that they should do certain things in certain ways, but all the stuff that you're sharing is certainly worth, as you say, reading to find out more, isn't it? And sorry, you were going to carry on with some more references.
Yeah, and if people did want to find out more about keto, in our episode 2 is what is keto, and,
yes.
and that's a great episode to listen to just to find out a bit more. So I've got some business books that I just love, and I haven't listened to him for ages. I love listening to Jim Collins on audio because he narrates most of his books.
Yes.
And so I listen to those over and over again quite often, but it's more aimed at big businesses rather than small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And then Graham Alcott that you mentioned, How to Be a Productivity Ninja, is something I aspire to. I try it, I keep trying it, and I don't keep up with it.
Can I just mention as well, he's got a new newsletter list that he's started since COVID, and he writes really well. It comes out on a Sunday, and there was one this Sunday that was particularly good, and I can't even remember what it was about now. But I'd recommend that. So I think it's grahamwalcott.com. I think if you go to his website, you can sign up for it there.
Okay. And then another one I like, and again, it's his narration that I think it just is so engaging, is Profit First by Mccolowitz.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some of the books I was thinking about the books. I have so many on my bookshelf, and there's so many that I've really got something out of. The thing with me is the follow through. You have to keep doing it. Like the slight edge, you have to keep it doing it every day. And then if you don't do it, then how do you get that motivation back to keep going?
Yeah, exactly. Those small daily tasks. Funny you mentioned the slight edge. That's a book that I've recommended a lot. And I was listening to a podcast that I also recommend, which is Steve Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO, who I just, again, a bit like you're saying, the narration thing. I just love what he says, how he says it, and his sort of ethos and so on. And he mentioned the slight edge in his podcast this week, in fact, which I'd not heard him mention before. So I was pleased that he said it was one of his favourite books. So that was good to hear. Lovely. It's funny you're saying about books as well. I was looking through my Kindle account because I try and use collections on my Kindle to try and keep things in some sort of order. I keep finding books that are free, and I think, oh, they look really good. That looks really good. I'm going to download it, and I go to download it, and I downloaded it 3 years ago, but I haven't read it yet, sort of thing. So I've been trying to get some organisation to it, and I was laughing to myself the other day that at the moment I've got loads of books categorised in collections, but I've got 650 that haven't been categorised in any way. And I was like doing it and just like reveling in the fact that I had all these books that I could organise, not read, just organise. And I thought the only saving grace for it is that they're actually not physical books, messing up my house. But I was so laughing to myself about how excited I was about the fact that I got so many books at my fingertips, even if I'll never have enough time to read them all. And on the narration front, another one I'd recommend is Malcolm Gladwell. When he narrates his books, like Outliers or whatever, I always love listening to him, regardless of what he's saying almost. So I know.
Okay, I've only read his books. I've never listened.
Yeah, no, he does most of his I think, or certainly Outliers he did do, and I really enjoyed that one. I'll probably find out it wasn't him, and it's just some other American person who's got a nice voice. But there we go. So I've just banged my elbow on my laptop, so that probably got in everyone's ears. So apologies there. So last couple of questions. What about those days where it goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those?
So it's usually something that goes wrong rather than a whole day that goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And I try to continue and push through, and I've got to sort this out. And then at some point it will just dawn on me that, Jackie, you've just got to walk away and leave it and come back to it. And I in fact had one of those days yesterday, and of course once you sleep on it, then things become a bit clearer. Another thing that I'll quite often do is I'll phone my sister, and just in the process of just telling her about it, I'll come up with the solution. So
she won't have got a word in edgeways, and then you'll go, thanks, that was really helpful. And she's like, I haven't said anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, I know what I'm going to try now. I know what I'm going to do now. So yeah. He's my go-to person.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant.
But I tend to be quite positive. I'm not necessarily a fantastically positive person, but I'm sort of quite laid back, so I don't get embroiled in things too much.
No. And so your day where you get to live more, so that's where I talk about you getting to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What do those days look like for you?
This is a really, really, really hard question for me. Because I'm just quite content with my life as it is. So I love doing what I do in terms of work. I tend to have some time, free time to do things in the afternoon. And what would I change? Probably nothing. And, of course, holidays are lovely, but they're great for a couple of weeks and then you come back to reality. So I think I'd put it down to spending time with my boys. And now that they're older, I don't get so much of that. And spending time with friends. So if I've got a day where I can be with some friends, doing something, might be going out for a meal or just spending some time with my boys, and sometimes I can actually get them to play a game. Maybe it's Monopoly, maybe it's playing cards, then I'm happy with that. That's good for me. Nothing super duper. I don't need anything super duper.
Yeah, no, you don't need something super duper. My answer to that is probably reading. When I used to do that whole what's your perfect Tuesday, because I think a lot of people don't actually know what their perfect day would look like, so they don't either feel happy that they've achieved it, or they never really get to it because they don't actually know what it's supposed to look like anyway. I think that's one of the real sort of first things, is be really clear what that looks like. And I always used to feel a bit like you sort of started with saying, oh well, it's not really that special sort of thing, because I'd be like, I just need to be somewhere with an armchair, a book, and something nice to drink and some nice food.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that's my perfect holiday. So I'm not one that, it doesn't really matter where I go on holiday. That's why I like my caravan so much, because I could do that in a field somewhere. I don't really need, sightseeing or monuments or anything else. It's I'm quite happy with it how it is, really. So
I'm happy with that for a holiday as well, except I don't want a caravan. Want a caravan. And it has to be somewhere warm where I can just sit in the sun and read my book. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, I'm not so worried about the warm, although I like warm. But I was going to say, because I like going skiing, but then our ski apartments are normally really warm, so you're never really cold when you go skiing, are you? So contrary to what people who don't go skiing, because they think it's too cold, think.
No. Yes.
Let's not talk skiing. We'll both get too depressed because we haven't been.
No, I was just going to say, because the first year that we decided to take the boys skiing is we didn't get there.
No.
Twice. We were supposed to go in December. We moved it to February. We're now coming up to February, and we won't be going then either.
No. Oh, it'll be extra special when you do get to go.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie. It's been so good talking to you. So interesting as well, just because we know each other already. So it's a different type of interview, I think, as well. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in contact.
So on my website, fabulouslyketo.com, and all social media, I'm Fabulously Keto, except for Instagram, which is Fabulously Keto 1.
Lovely. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com/ in this case 209, then you'll find them there. And this week I want to talk to you about self-development. It's the topic for the week under the fundamental sustain, which is all about keeping things going, getting routines and rituals and development happening for you and your business to ensure that you keep improving and keep pressing on to be successful. So we talked at the Gold Calm Call on Monday about the different ways that we like to keep ourselves developing, and we shared a number of resources that I thought I'd share with you here today. We talked quite a lot about books, and we also talked about the different ways that we consume them and ensure that we learn from them. Jerry uses a highlighter and sticky notes in his books to ensure that the learning sticks, and I mentioned an app that I've recently started using called Readwise, which is connected to my Kindle account, and when I highlight important passages and text in my Kindle, it exports to Readwise, and then Readwise emails and sends me a message on my phone every day with 5 references from those quotes that I've saved. In fact, 4 from the quotes I've saved, and then 1 from a completely different book, a new book that I don't have in my library. And the idea is that it sort of surfaces the content that I've thought was important and I've in effect highlighted, so that every day I get to read some of that content again just to refresh my memory and keep it sort of top of mind. And then the 5th one is something that I haven't read, and it's, I guess, designed to encourage me to go out and invest in that book, but certainly can provide some great learning as well. The other thing that David mentioned was Blinkist, which is a site and an app where they create summaries of books. So if you've ever read a business book and it's like 300 pages and you think that could have been done in about 20 pages, then Blinkist might be for you. They do really good quality summaries of books that are designed to be read in a blink, and that's not just like a second. There's normally sort of 10 chapters or 10 pages of notes that are distilled from each of the books that they work from. So Blinkist might be worth a look. Some of the books that were recommended were, again, Happy Sexy Millionaire by Stephen Bartlett, which is one that I've read recently and really enjoyed and found really useful, and Jerry is also raving about it. Gratitude by Louise Hay is another one that Jerry's reading currently, and Lucy mentioned They Ask, You Answer, a revolutionary approach to inbound sales, content marketing and today's digital consumer by Marcus Sheridan, as she's focusing very much on her marketing at the moment. And then we briefly talked about Knowledge is King website, and I had a look on there while we were speaking, and I was interested to see that The Slight Edge, which is a book that I rave about on here on a regular basis, is actually available on there at quite a good price. I think it was about £8, and it's really expensive on Amazon at the moment. I think it's actually out of print, or certainly on the Amazon site it doesn't appear to be available as it would normally be, and so it's sort of like £40 or something. So Knowledge is King has got some good priced books, The Slight Edge, and that's one of my, in fact, it's probably my favourite business book. We also talked about using podcasts for learning and also YouTube, and that led us on to talking about TED Talks and how there's hundreds, probably thousands of them now, and you can see those on YouTube, and they also have their own website. And it reminded me of a podcast that I've often listened to called TED Radio Hour, and that's where they take a topic that's been covered on TED, and then they talk about it for an hour and pull out different parts of TED Talks and sometimes go and do further interviews with those speakers to get some more depth to what was said. So that can be useful if you're interested in that sort of format. The one thing I would say is that with books and podcasts and TED Talks and everything else, just remember you don't have to finish them. If they're not good enough, if they're not working for you, if they're not what you're expecting, then there is so much other, there's so many other resources out there and so many other podcasts and so many other books that you could read that you really don't need to feel that you have to finish something that you've started. I know some of us feel that that's what we have to do, but you really don't need to do that. If you're not enjoying something, you're not finding it very helpful, and you wish you weren't listening to it or reading it, then just stop and find something else, because there's so many other books and podcasts that you could be listening to and reading that there's no need to sort of wade through something that's not going to be useful to you. Life's too short, frankly. Hope you found that helpful. As ever, the show notes are at powertolivemore.com/209, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.